So, without further ado, Dr. Jaffe, if you'd like to take us into the next leg, we're ready.
Okay, well, it's mea culpa time. I was informed by, I would say, 4 people at the break that I have been totally, focused on the male business founder, which is a great majority of businesses, but nowadays and in this group, that's not the norm, and that I've heard, and I know our hostess, that there are many and increasing numbers of women who are founding and creating family business. So I want to start by first apologizing for neglecting that, and second, to say, as John Shane asked me, well, what about, you talked about paternalism, what about maternalism? Is that different? And so I wanted to invite and open the floor for some responses, critiques, whatever, from about how women business leaders may have a different style, have a different style, and what maybe in what ways they express maybe over control or how they facilitate communication in the family. So a couple of people want to take the opportunity to share further information that I did not. Go ahead. Yep. Let me bring you the microphone. So
I'm a banker, but I have clients that are female business owners.
Well, share.
And so they
Take.
tend to lean on advisors more, from my perspective.
Mm-hmm. Any of them business leaders?
Yes.
Do you see any difference in the women business leaders and the male business leaders?
That they lean on
That's
advisors
yeah.
more than the
You
men.
mean
The men are more independent, where the women are, open, in my experience.
so? It's kind of the independence, versus taking advice.
I think it's collaborative.
Yeah. Let me.
I think women lead collaboratively as opposed to individually, and I think that builds teams better than the alternative. My opinion.
My experience in my work is that it has always been a lot easier to communicate with men. But when you start working,
How do you account for that?
There's a wider range of topics that you can talk about, and when it's easier and it's a route that you fall into, about 12 years ago, I began to be able to start working with women, and one of the reasons that I learned, my skills are never up to where I'd like to be, but one of the things that I started doing was asking questions. Why? Why do you feel that way? Tell me more about that. Mm-hmm. With a man, it's a lot more like playing tennis. You just bat the ball back and forth and you come to a resolution. With a woman, you have to go through a lot more feeling questions, a lot more exercise. And so you can use the word collaborative, you can use a lot of different words, but if you don't talk differently and get a different mindset, then a woman will dismiss you because you're just another guy.
Other comments here? This is what a dialogue is. We have different opinions in the room. Go ahead. Yeah.
I would just say, as a mother, because you talked about paternalism, as a mother who's not working in the business, I think mothers kind of want all the kids to have equal. The father, if he's running the business, more likely to say, what's best for the business? Who's capable of doing this? And mother said, but in the end, I want to keep all my kids happy. I mean, there is that difference between mothers and fathers, I think. Thank you.
Now, you know, my experience, it may be a challenge how you can make good business decisions and keep everybody happy, and that's where the dialogue, you know, comes up in a family. Well, everybody would like this, but there's also this. So any others? I want to make sure. What? Yeah.
Thank you. Women, I think, tend to come with a different history to leadership in business. They may not have started the company, but they find themselves in a situation where they are responsible for and very capable of running the company. And you have to take into consideration that history of how they got there, which may be different from the most men that come to leadership in business.
I'm working my way.
In the workplace, I think women leaders, business owners are more nurturing for whether they're family members or they're non-family members working within the company.
Yep.
Dr. Jaffe, you mentioned that you've gone to many foreign countries.
Yeah.
And I'm almost wondering if culture has something to do with how not only women run their businesses, but also men run their businesses. I've always thought, and because growing up as a Hispanic, culturally we have some things that we have to overcome as women business owners.
Well, there's two things. One is actually I've written a book about different cultures of global family business called Cross Cultures, and it's on Amazon, paperback, easy to get, and it talks about the three cultures, the honor culture, which is Hispanic and Southern European, and the individualistic culture of the West, and the kind of Confucian culture of South Asia, and how those influence it. But one thing I've seen all over the world is that even though the number of business founders who are women are a low percentage, in a family business, the number of women in the next generation who are actively involved in the business and becoming kind of leaders are actually, I would say, it's just about 50-50. Most countries have given up oldest son kind of model, even though there's a couple of holdovers. And now the reason we have this challenge of the family team is it's pretty easy. If I pick my oldest son and that's it, and you're the daughter, you're tough beans, and you're out. It's easy. You can go on generation without any conflict because everybody knows where they stand. You get to the next generation where there's 5 people, and 2 are women, 3 are men, have different capabilities, and it's a challenge. But I'm amazed that in the Middle East and a lot of very kind of male-oriented cultures, the way in which women are becoming successors, and I think more so in family businesses. So 1 or 2 more comments. We'll continue this because I'm going to redefine the next activity to include this topic. The other thing I wanted to comment on is someone asked me about the difference between working in the business and being a family member. And when I talk about the next generational team, the question of who is that team is one that different families answer in different ways. So when you're looking at the next generation, some families say the people that are working in the business, that's the leadership, those are the leaders, and the people that are not working in the business will not inherit ownership or will not be active. Other family members, other families say that everybody is active, and the people who are owners but not working in the business, the people working in the business are responsible to all the family owners. so they have a different way of saying who are the people that are involved in the next generation team. Another area, which again is you should do a whole program on it, is married-ins. And I would say just about half of the families pretty much explicitly start by saying that married-ins will not have a role in the family business and will certainly not inherit it. But more and more families either eventually come around to the fact, we're missing a lot of good talent by dismissing the married-ins, and maybe we should open up. So I'm not going to be, since I'm not talking about family governance, there's a lot to be said about who's at the table. I'm talking about the team that comes together and not how the team is selected or who it does, simply because there's so much and you really have to save that and put that into another program. So let's do another dialogue. I've talked a lot. What I want to do is divide up by family interest groups. And I want to create 3 groups, and actually I'm considering differentiating one into two groups. So here's what I'd like to do. We're going to be moving, so be prepared to take your books and toys and go to another table. I want to have one set of tables, and let's say they'll be over here. Let's say these 3 tables are for advisors. And so advisors will have a slightly different topic, but these 3 tables should be enough for the advisors. Then in the middle here, let's say there's 2 or 3 tables, but let's fill them up. Will be for non-founding family members who are working in the business, not working in the business, but who are members of the next generation, where they'll be inheriting, they may be married in, and they may be working in the business. So that'll be these 2 tables, and if there's more, this table. Down here, this band are the business founders, and here's the way I want to divide it up. I want to have this is the older generation, the business founders, male and female, and the spouses. And the way I want to do it is I want to separate the male and the female. So women who are spouses and business creators will be at this table. Males who are either married to business creators or business creators here. Let's see, we should be able to fit at 2 tables. So we're going to rearrange in those sets of tables. Male, female, next generation, advisors. And then I will explain the task.
Some of us are second generation.
So for the next about 20 minutes, we're going to be talking in your groups. The advisors, what I'd like you to, your topic would be is how can you promote active intergenerational dialogue in your clients? And that's the first question. And the second question is, what do you need to learn or do better in order to be successful? So how do you promote intergenerational dialogue, and what do you need to be successful? Yeah, so that's for the advisors. Okay, now the older, now the other tables, there's 3 questions that I want you each to answer. The 3 questions is what do you want from the other generation, either the younger generation or the older generation? What do you want from them? and what can they, what can they do to help, and then what do you offer them? What are you offering? And then what do you need to learn in order to be more successful in moving the business across generations? So 3 questions. What do you want from the other generation? What do you offer them? And what do you need to learn? And at the end, we're going to talk for 20 minutes, and I'm going to go around with the microphone and ask each of the tables to report on those 3 questions, and we're going to see the different perspectives that emerge. And one of the things that we may see would be a difference between the male and female perspective. We'll see how the next generation, oh, nice, you all fit at table, and then we have all these advisors. So let's take 20 minutes. At 11:20, we'll report back in, and then we'll have some discussion. Okay. Part of the learning that takes place in working across generations in families is for the different generations to give each other feedback and talk to each other about how they're doing and how they can do better. And so this actual activity is one that I do in families that really helps them for each generation to say, what do they actually want? What kind of behavior and what do they offer? So let's hear from each of the tables what they came up with. I've got the microphone. Let's hear from this table first. Who is your... Stand up. Let's pay attention. This is very...
Yes, Jim, are you listening?
Yeah.
Okay, so we want...
Can you turn it up?
Collaboration. We need to look at what worked and what didn't work. And well, that's what we want the next
That's what
generation
you want from,
to
yeah.
evaluate what worked and didn't work. We want respect for the founders, and we want to provide respect for the next generation. We want the next generation to have happiness, and we want them to be engaged in planning and for the future, develop efficiencies, have common goals for the business as a way to bring cohesiveness to the family unit, and we have concerns for the non-involved family member in the business.
Perfect.
Great. Each of these things that she brings up is a statement, but it's also an opening for an opportunity. And the opening in the family is to begin to talk about them. Well, how can we provide that? Did you present all 3 lists?
We only got
You only got to one. Oh. To be continued. ...
I think one of the things that we all...
Hold on. Yeah.
I think one of the things that we all talked about or touched upon, each and every one of us, was maybe perhaps the definition of balance and work ethic between generations, and maybe having a clear understanding of what that means. We all kind of agreed, I thought, that younger generations take a different approach to working, as opposed to the founding generation that you work 1,000,000 hours, and if you haven't worked 1,000,001 hours, you're not being efficient, you're not being successful. So I think the younger generation takes a very different viewpoint of how many hours really needs to be worked.
And there's no right and wrong, but it's a dialogue. I think one of the things about asking what we want from the other generation and what we offer is that it's very important in building teamwork to take responsibility. It means that you may start out by saying, I want you to do this, and I want that, and I want this. But in the end, you have to say, well, what is it that you can do to promote that? And whether you're in the young generation, which we're going to hear for, whether you're an advisor, whether you're a spouse, business founder, whatever your role, there is something that you can do to make it better and to improve it, and that's what you can focus on more usefully than what other people could do and aren't doing. So let me ask this group here to share their responses to the questions. Here's your microphone. I'm sorry.
Linda had her comments on a little notepad, and we scratched out 2 pages. But then you realize we're at the...
Competition is not an issue in the room, right?
Not to say her results may have been...
I could say more, but okay, go ahead.
But we're at the results table.
Right.
We're at the guys...
Oh, okay.
We're the founders
Unlike...
table, so. I'm sorry.
He said it.
Those are beautiful...
He's promoting dialogue by
exactly.
his comments.
Well, following up on what you just finished with, and something that my daughter introduced me to, the more we care for our people, the younger generation wants to see more benefits. It's not just the money, where the founders, we were just kind of pushing through for results, but the benefits yield to better employees, which give us better results. So we started the 3 questions. We got them all. What do you want from the inheritors? We want them to take over. We want them to be invested in what was our life's dream to become part of their own dream. And we see them as an employee, as a family member, and also as an investor in and they may not have any capital in the game, but that time, what I see with my family is sacrificing the many paths that our future could be, or to dedicate it toward this one. What do we offer? We offer our experience. We offer a life purpose. We can convey our skills that we've learned and are still learning. Nobody here has stopped learning. The young man brought up that he would like to see the recipe. What was the recipe that got us to where we were?
Great. So again, if you're focusing on your learning and what you have to learn, it's easier to ask things of the other generation. So we've talked about what they're asking of you. Let's hear from the later generation people about their response to these questions. You're the reporter?
Is it fitting because I'm following my dad?
Very.
All right, so I think some of the things that we talked about at the table here, which is a mix of 2nd, 3rd, 4th generation, a really cool mix of people. What do we want from the older generation? I think top of the list was trust. Trust us enough to let us get out there and scrape our knees and get up and dust ourselves off and maybe listen to our experience and what our takeaway is from that, and have patience. Just listen, have patience, and show us the resources. I think that's always a big thing, is let us have the template of going and relying on the resources to solve the problem, not maybe being told, here's the solution. So I think when we talked about what the younger generation offers to the older generation, you know, we really want to improve it. We want to make it better. We bring high investment, high loyalty, high energy, fresh perspectives, and we're taking responsibility. We're taking the reins. We want to. One thing that I'm not doing enough of that I realized was giving credit. I need to give more credit to my dad for, you know, getting me this far. Talking about what we need to learn, I think that we talked a lot about boundaries. You know, how do we enforce boundaries and how do we keep balance, especially when second and third and fourth generations, we're bringing in more than just ourselves. We're bringing in our partners, we're bringing in our children, and it's not like the one sole proprietor of a business. It's impacting many people. So balance and boundaries is not just a one-person thing. It's a whole family unit. What I need to learn is how do I develop my skills? I might not know what I don't know, so I need help in learning where's my mentorship and those clear expectations. I feel like sometimes those expectations are changing with the more that we learn and the more responsibility that we take on, the expectations shift. And sometimes that's not clearly outlined. So how to access our resources. Anybody else have anything? Summarize it?
Wonderful. It's just interesting to see the convergences between the wants and the offers between the different groups, and find that everybody, when they can step back, is aware that they have a wonderful thing that they can create, and the challenge is to not let things from the past, bad habits, unconsciousness get in the way of it, to really appreciate and use a positive attitude to build upon it. And I noticed that both groups said they wanted to be appreciated more, and sometimes you forget to do that. So this is very good, and now we're going to hear from people who are there to help you. And I think that advisors today are finding, maybe they went to school to learn finance and accounting and all these, and legal principles and things like that, and all of a sudden they find themselves in a situation where they're not dealing with numbers, they're dealing with people, and they're dealing with things. And because you trust your advisors, it's actually good that you ask them to do things that sometimes stretch them beyond their comfort zone. So the good news and the bad news for advisors is you're asked in to do things. I mean, who of you, is an expert on child rearing? You get asked how much money to give your kids. You're asked, about team building. You're asked about, all kinds of things. And the challenge is to be helpful. So let's hear. And one of the areas that you can be helpful is to not just be an advisor to one person in the family or one couple, but to be an advisor to the whole family, and that's what this is about. So let's hear from each of these tables about promoting intergenerational dialogue as a kind of a stretch goal for your work, and then what you need to learn to do that. So who's the... We didn't take that. Well, whatever you took, you can...
I'll tell you.
Yeah.
We're the misfits. We didn't.
Oh, you didn't fit anywhere.
We didn't fit at any of these.
So
tables,
tell us. That's what I thought. Are you next generation? Are you?
We didn't fit.
Yeah. So what do you?
We had a lovely discussion and got to know each other and hear about what each other's were. So thank you so much for that.
See, they're in the middle. They're in the middle. So if you come up to them at lunch and say, what did you really talk about, you may find out more. Right. So maybe they'll share in a question. So this group, who's your, here you go.
We did the questions.
Well, good.
So,
at least somebody follows instructions.
You know, I think we all realize the intergenerational dialogue, it's critical, and sometimes just that process will resolve, you know, a lot of the issues. A lot of great ideas. Here, the idea was brought up that we want everyone to be in that meeting, so we don't want to exclude people. We want the founders and incumbents, everybody in there. We want that meeting to be an open, frank, respectful meeting. And Thomas brought up a very interesting idea that as far as a pre-meeting activity, sending out, because we realize different generations are comfortable communicating different ways. So in this case, sending out perhaps an electronic mapping to where you know, you may have children who are more comfortable writing out, you know, what's going on, and so this electronic mapping template can help prior to the meeting so that people's voices are being heard. James brought up an interesting idea too, that sometimes, you know, rather than discuss the business so much, is you create a meeting around maybe setting up a foundation where it's a little more relaxed. Other people are addressing different issues they have, and it's apparently a good tool to just get the dialogue going. Some other ideas, well, the other question, you know, just that we have to obtain good information, more information, listen, and be more neutral, and that we can't just focus on, you know, the founder. We need to try and focus on everybody as much as we can. So that kind of disbursement and neutrality, we want to bring people's guard down. And within that too is to let the group know that we can bring in outside resources. It doesn't have to be just us, the advisor, you know, as you say, trying to run everything, that we have other resources. So those are some of the ideas we came up with.
Wonderful. Anybody else have something that they want to share, pipe in with?
Could you talk about the positive reminiscence?
Yeah.
So,
Here's your.
I'm not only a banker, but I'm a chaplain. And
Here's your community.
So I try to get family members to talk about, like, what is their favorite memory growing up. And so it's almost like marriage counseling when you can get people to kind of think fondly about each other. It kind of lets guards down and they feel like they're in a safer environment.
Great. Well, we haven't talked about that, but one of the ways to honor the legacy is to, you know, really talk about the family and the legacy and the history and the story, and to share family stories and to talk about the things that are wonderful about the family rather than, you know, have discussions of problems. And I think that when the family knows the legacy, and sometimes the second, third generation doesn't know as much as the older generation thinks, because you're kind of around them and you think they just kind of pick up by smell all these things. They don't really know the story. How does the business found it? Well, none of the kids was there, so you sometimes need to tell the story and some of the challenges that you overcame.
One quick point that may come up in our panel discussion later. I'm with a business owner that actually it was with George Buffett, and we were talking one day about the family transitioning the family business, and he said, gosh, I'm going to go ahead and do a little video and share the history of my family, and the business so that my family understands where they came from and where we came from and that kind of thing. He said, but gosh, I don't think any of my kids really care. They don't want to, except my grandson. Now, my grandson, and he's actually one of the panel members today.
Yeah.
My grandson might be interested. And unfortunately, that was a couple of months before George passed away suddenly from a heart attack. So I'd certainly encourage you, family business owners, the patriarchs and the matriarchs, if there's a way to record your family history for future generations, don't wait to do that. I think that's pretty important.
Great, thank you. So, final group.
I'm the lucky one.
Okay, congratulations.
Hi, I'm Kathy Wasita, and I'm a banking center manager for New Mexico Bank and Trust. So I have a little bit different view with visiting with businesses and bringing them to our bank as opposed to a financial advisor and CPA and so on. But we have a big diversity here. We have a psychologist, and we have a CPA, and we have an attorney and trust officer, and so you name it. So they may give a few more inputs. So we went down to the basics. How could we promote, in our first, as a parent, the first generation, I guess we should say, to our future generation? So I guess we went down to the basics, as Dr. Jaffe stated. The first thing he said was love. So first of all, we have to love each other as a family, and then you have to find out what the kids' passion is. Do they really want to be in this business? Because I see several businesses out there where they have their kids working for them, and it's just a guaranteed job, a guaranteed paycheck. They come and go as they please, and they don't have the passion that their parents have. So maybe they're not the right fit to take over. So we really need to determine if your kids really are passionate about that, about your business. And if they are, what part of the business are they passionate in? And then groom them and nurture them, just like we do when we teach our kids how to ride a bike. And then, we slowly have to let go. So the parents have to eventually let go and let them run the business. So they have to trust them. And then they still are very involved in the family business. And so then they have to, the next generation, the younger generation, has to be accountable. So they meet, and are they accountable? And if they're not, and there's some numbers falling, then what are their solutions? Don't give them your solutions, let them try to figure it out themselves. And other points were communicate, have family gatherings, and I think it's been stated before. One of the things that was said is, before you give them a solution, really listen and keep probing and asking questions, because we're, as adults or parents or owners, you want to get to that solution, you want to solve that issue. Well, you may be solving the wrong issue. So really listen and do your research on what the real problem is. And a lot of times, like we've stated, it has nothing to do with the business a lot of times. And let me see what else. Family stories, we also talked about that. So what we have found is that newer generations have kind of lost touch as to what the business, why the business was started, the foundation, and what really was involved in starting that business. So tell those stories to the newer generations. And it also helps them to connect, because they have something in common by doing that. And let me see. Praise your kids to success. And I actually gave a speech yesterday. We didn't talk about this, by the way. Sorry.
Yeah.
I like to talk.
Well,
They call me Chatty Cathy.
You're doing good. You're doing good.
I spoke to middle school kids yesterday on positive affirmations and how they need to love and approve of themselves and so on. So also praising your kids, even when you think they're not doing it your way, but they're doing it their way, so you praise them, and eventually they will be successful. And let me see if I missed anything. One thing that they said about the men, so the women tend to nurture the family, and the men tend to nurture the businesses. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, in order for the men to, give up that control, something tragic has to happen. the egg has to break, and whether it's a heart attack or, you know, a divorce or whatever. And so that is difficult for people who are the newer generation to actually get into the business, because their father is nurturing that business. So, any other?
Great. Well, we've covered a lot of ground, so I want to kind of end with a little bit of a kind of a practical look at creating family teams. People say, well, you've told about it. It's so interesting to talk about all the problems and to talk generally about the solutions. Let's be real practical. So, first of all, back at the start, in the first 10 minutes, you covered all of the general qualities of teams. Maybe except one or two that came out. So a team generally is the unit of action and operation of every organization. And a team is a focused group that has a task that they all do together that they can't do on their own. So without teams, not a lot would get done, and big jobs need teams. And teams are connected to other teams. So they're kind of teams of teams. So in general, what makes for a good team is, first of all, the vision. An inspiring vision. Everybody has to know what it is that they're doing. And it has to happen in a way that is meaningful and motivating. So it isn't just, this is what we're doing. We're making car parts. Oh, great. What's behind that? What is it? The second is roles. Is everybody in the team doesn't do the same thing. They have to have different roles in order to get something done, and they have to understand that there is some parts of the role where you take action. And so the trust part of a team is that you trust somebody to take action in certain areas, and other areas you're involved. So families have some challenges there. Has to be organized. There has to be kind of some kind of a work plan, some kind of a project plan. How are we doing it? And one that wasn't spoken about is the idea of integration, and the team has to integrate all of the different activities. So it's not usually enough for everybody to do what they do. There's some way in which someone has to be looking for integration, and that's where leadership comes in. Maybe a single leader, or there may be just an integrating process. Accountability. A team has to be accountable, and this is true in a family, and this is why when a group of family members are working in the business, question is, what is the role of the people that aren't in the business? Well, if they own part of the business, the people that are working in the business have to understand that they're working for the whole family, which includes those who aren't working in the business. So there's accountability, and there has to be, if you're an inheritor and an owner, there's a role for you overseeing the family team. And they have to be outward facing and connecting to other teams. So every team is connected to other teams. So there are two things that I want to highlight about families, and then I'll end with kind of presenting characteristics of a next generation team. Two things that are tools that are incredibly useful for any team, but particularly for a family team. And one is what we call a family charter, or a team charter. With a family, it's called a family charter, obviously. A charter is since different people see teams in a different way, and remember that family team has come a long way from the family hierarchy, and there have been bumps, things along the road. One of the helping things in a team is a team charter that says, what are we doing, what's our vision, and how are we doing it? So the team charter goes from the vision to how are we doing it? How do we work together? It will have areas like how do we respect each other? How do we run a meeting? What are we, what are the ways in which we're accountable? And a team charter is a kind of a how-to document for being together, and it's very important for family members because it often has things that are hard for family members. So just starting with respecting each other, and every family team will have somebody who kind of crosses the line in some people's eye and is doing things that are disrespectful. So there's a set of kind of operating principles and some way in which how is this being enforced? How do we do it? So it may be so a team and a family has a charter for how they operate, and one of the ways to create an effective team is to create a team charter. The second tool, activity, came up a little bit, is the idea of feedback. And feedback is the process by which you check in with each other and answer the question, well, how are we doing? So if you think about the team, the plan is great, the ideas are great, the charter says exactly how it is. Well, the process never goes exactly the way you think it is. There's always things doing. So you think you're doing great, and other people are saying, well, gee, he's ordering me around, he's doing, he's not really following the principles, he's not listening. And so every team needs a process to a time where they get together regularly to say, how are we doing and what do we need to hear from each other that we're not hearing? So the charter and the feedback, we get this from regular team building, but this is really important. So now let's go over and look at 6 things that I think are important in creating a family team. And this is where I want to leave you, but I'll be around at lunch, and I think all of the programs in the afternoon are going to build on this topic. So first of all is being proactive. What a family has to be looking at is not when do we need to appoint a new leader, but looking ahead 5 or 10 years, what are the things that we're going to have to do and how are we getting started? So a lot of leaders are saying, well, we don't want to begin team building or talk about the next generation team while I'm still around. But what I find is that the family members need to get together and say, well, what are we going to do next? How are we going to operate? And sometimes it's really helpful for the family team to not have the family leader, the older generation there. So one family, for example, family came to me and they said, well, we have 7 siblings and we're Italian and we argue all the time, we never listen to each other, and we're going to inherit this incredible business, and our father, who's in his 80s, runs it himself, but we're all of a sudden, sometime, probably soon, going to be in a position. We want to begin to work together. And then they said, well, but our, yeah, so I said, well, that's good. And they said, but our father says we shouldn't do it. I said, well, no, let me tell me again, how old are you? I'm 45. So you're telling me you need your father's permission to get together and have a conversation about the future. Well, he's not happy, and so they said, well, could I talk to your father? So I went and talked to him, and he said, oh, I know consultants. Yeah. Well, the first thing you're going to do is get together and say, I'm fired. And which was, had a lot of, good sense to it. But I said, okay, well, here's the thing. Let's make it very clear. We are not talking about your tenure. This is your choice. You started the business. It's your business. You will stay as long as you stay. What we're talking about is the next generation team. So he kind of shrugged and said, well, what a stupid thing to do, but why don't you go do it? So then we met, and the third month, the third meeting, the father went to his daughter and said, well, are you guys still having those meetings? Oh yeah. Can I come? So once they were starting, he joined. So the challenge is to be proactive, to set these things up for the next challenge, rather than the ones that exist, and to look ahead. Shared vision and goal. A shared vision is easy. It's a wonderful process when a family, next generation, gets together, because they get to celebrate what they have, the legacy, and then they get to say, how are we going to go forward? So talking of vision is a way of getting to know each other. It's a way of listening to the older generation, but it's also a place where the next generation say, well, now, what are we going to do? What's our next act? Do we want to continue this? Just because it's wonderful doesn't mean we can't sell it. It doesn't mean we have to run it. Doesn't mean we can't start new businesses if we're excited about something else, if there's something that we want to do different. So the idea of combining the generations is a wonderful process, and it shouldn't be rushed, and it really builds unless the next generation has created the vision together for the next generation, they're not going to be motivated, they're not going to be on board, and they're not going to be actively engaged. Develop safety and trust. It's very important in the family. People mention over and over again, I don't feel safe in bringing that up. I don't feel safe talking about it. And there has to be a climate of safety and trust, and that's not something that you declare. There are, as part of the family charter, you say, this is what we're going to do to sustain trust, and this is what we're going to do if somebody breaches it. Clear policies. Family teams are operating against the grain, against the challenge of the family's history. They have to have some clear policies. This is how we're going to do it. One of the clearest ones that comes up is a family team. If they're an operating group in a business, they need to meet very regularly. And so the family sets up a policy where every Monday morning from 7 to 8 or 7 to 9, we will get together, we'll have breakfast together, and we'll chart out the week. And then the family says, that's our policy. And then somebody says, I'm traveling, let's cancel the meeting. And then somebody doesn't show up and they're late. And 2 or 3 months later, you look in and where's the Monday morning meeting? Well, it was a good idea, but it didn't work out. So having policies, this is where feedback comes in. It's really important. You mentioned personal development, and that's something that I find in a lot of families where being in the family business is a very, very challenging, and the family needs education about the business, and it can start early. I mean, there are some families have family summer camp, and the 7, 8, 9-year-old kids, they create a business and they sell something to the family, and they learn about entrepreneurship. And these are 7-year-olds, and it may not be for everybody, but in this family of entrepreneurs, this is a great thing. And they begin, as they get older, to learn more about the business. And practice. Taking time for team building, taking time to develop the team, taking time, setting it aside, making all these things priorities. So what I've tried to do this morning, and what I hope I've been successful, is to engage you in a process of looking at team building is hard enough on its own. Team building in a family going through generations is even harder. So after talking some about the challenges and the things that you have to overcome, we've looked at some of the ways in which you could move across generations, and ended with a sense of what you can do to build a family team with the members. And there are a number of family teams. So there's the family team, maybe if a number of family members are operating the business, and that may even include non-family members. And then there's the family team of the people that are the owners group. And in a second generation, it may be a small group. If it's your third or fourth generation, the owners there may be 30 or 40 owners, so you have to have a group representing the owners, and that's a board. So maybe you haven't, in the second generation, created a board, but if you're going to get into a third generation, you're going to do that. So there's a governance board team. Then there's a family team about how are we doing as a family, and how are we caring about each other, and how are we helping each other grow and thrive, and how are we dealing with grandkids and next generation and education and learning and teaching values. And those are family meetings. So each of those has a team, and each of those teams are different. There may be some overlap, but different members of it. So team building in a family is a very complex thing. We've scratched the surface of it. We've talked in generalities, but I hope I've given you some direction and some concrete things that you can do to begin to build a family team. And I really thank you for inviting me and to spend the time with you.